Hi, this is Ivan Illan, the founder and chief investment officer at AWAIM. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Today, I'm going to talk about unemployment as well as the employment picture here in the United States. Even for someone like myself who does this every day, looking at research, conducting research, looking at data from government reports. If you look at Federal Reserve data, Bureau of Economic Research, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census Bureau, Department of Labor, there's a lot of data, and none of it actually syncs up very neatly. This is one of the challenges in conducting research and viewing data. There's so many different varieties, flavors, spices. It can be incredibly confusing, which of course, when you're a global macro money manager like we are, the data and the clarity of data matters considerably. So one of the things that we were looking at yesterday in our investment committee meeting was some published research, and it really is an amalgam between Federal Reserve data, BEA, BLS, Census Bureau, Department of Labor, and it paints a picture of full-time employment as a percent of labor force, which is quite dire and something that we haven't seen so explicitly illustrated before. Usually when we're looking at employment data, we're seeing it from a particular department or a particular publisher of that data, like the BLS, for example. So this particular amalgam of these different data sources shows really a very stunning decrease in full-time employment over the past few years. Really beginning in 2022 and just being on this fairly steady decline. And we know that this year in May of 2025 there was a very visible decline in full-time employment. And so I think the point of this podcast today is to remind folks to not take unemployment data at face value, not take employment data at face value. There's quite a lot of nuance and variance to employment data, and maybe even some of you listening to this, have firsthand accounts of people who are working 2-3 jobs, part-time jobs, in order to cobble together a full-time employment experience, or at least wages. And in fact, one of the things that we see when we look at, I would say, readily available data from BLS as an example, and right now I'm looking at a chart that shows data, specifically unemployment rates, as well as part-time and full-time employment, all coming from BLS. And this is just looking back to June of 2022, so just over the past 3 years. And we're looking at it as a percentage of change. And the first two things that we like to look at are unemployment rates. There's the very popular unemployment rate that everyone hears about, everybody knows. Right now it's around 4.2% unemployment. But there's a less known unemployment rate, which is U6, and I've written about this and spoken about it before. And that's sitting at around 7.8%. So, and that's been trending upward, as well as unemployment's been trending up. So regular unemployment, which is called U3, is at 4.2%. U6 as a measurement of unemployment, which counts those who are marginally employed or underemployed, would be the way to put it. People are not working full-time or getting, they're fully available, but they can't get full-time employment. They can't really even get a lot of part-time employment. So that's 7.8%, and that's up about. So unemployment, no matter how you look at it, has been trending upward and is up quite significantly. And it doesn't look like it's abating. And then when you start to drill deeper into it to look at part-time unemployment is up 12% over this period of time, according to BLS. And full-time employment is basically flat. This particular report from BLS is showing it's up about 1.75%. So call it, 2%. That's kind of nothing. But to see part-time employment from the same producer of the data, BLS, saying it's up 12%, 11.65 to be precise, over the past 3 years since June 30th of 2022, that's a very significant difference. It does tell us something very plainly. So, you can read all kinds of things. You can see that full-time employment, we're reading it regularly, that full-time employment is on the decline. People are leaving the labor force permanently. They're not returning to the labor force. Most of that is due to demographic and age, people just simply retiring and leaving the workforce. And which is perfectly acceptable and a natural and normal dynamic within the workforce. And yet, this is a structural shift. This is a big difference, and quite notable, because we do have new technologies. Everyone's been so excited about the AI euphoria and how that's going to further revolutionize the world. Well, that could very well be the case, but that will come at the expense of the service sector. Just like robotics revolutionized manufacturing, AI has the ability to revolutionize the service sector and workers within the service sector. And so in this broader trend of a decline in full-time unemployment, or by some measures, just an absolute meager holding on to, the current amount of full-time employment, that is set to continue to decline with advancements in technology. And so even during this period of time, which of course June of 2022 to now has been a rising interest rate environment, and so one of the drivers of this increase in part-time employment could very well be companies deciding to pivot towards hiring of part-time individuals because there's more flexibility to that employment. You hire people as you need them, you don't give them the hours when you don't need them, and that provides more flexibility for a company relative to hiring full-time employees. And that isn't necessarily a very healthy thing for the prognosis for the U.S. economy, because these periods of times where you see increases in part-time employment relative to full-time employment, which is exactly what we're seeing right now, those periods of times are usually preceded or during recessionary periods. And so this is something to keep in mind as you're wondering what's coming next for the U.S. economy, looking at the nature of employment as well as different unemployment data sets like U6 versus the regular unemployment rate that we always hear about on the nightly news. It gives us a better indication of what's happening at a macro level within the economy. And if you're able to look at part-time employment data versus full-time employment data and see, wow, there really is something quite different happening between those two different types of ways in which companies hire employees, and that's important because that can be highly indicative of what's to come next, and something that we certainly enjoy spending some time trying to understand to the best of our ability. So with that, I'll say goodbye for this month, and if you have any questions at all, always feel free to reach out to us. Visit our website at alignwealth.com, and a link is in the body of this podcast. And thanks so much. Have a great month.